Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Jason. I'm going to look into the camera so that you can get a clear angle because I know that's a big issue with the B-roll with the shots. Okay, guys, so hopefully y'all can see my face, but from time to time I might look down, guys, because I'm going to be looking at my data here. So we're going to start this press conference. Um, so right now, we at Passengers United, all of our team members are very upset about the service cuts that have been happening. And again, we understand that the MT has a $40 million cost associated with the overnight cab service. We do understand that. But we do feel that the MTA dropped the ball on several ways that it could have served people more efficiently, but it did not do so. So one of the suggestions that I would make with the MTA is that they could have like retweeted the Q60 bus route instead of it ending in South Jamaica. Maybe they could have turned it around at Archer Avenue and had it go up Archer to serve Jamaica Center, Parsons Archer, and then go to the 165th Street bus terminal. So people can get off and connect with the Q2 and the Q3 or the N6 or all those other routes. So that was a mistake number one that they did. So we're suggesting that the Q60 be extended. Instead of going to South Jamaica, turn it, extend it up, and bring it to Jamaica Center and 165th Street term. That's going to help a lot of people. Also, we're suggesting that the MT should put articulated buses on the Q60. And so there's more space, people are comfortable, because right now the Q60 is very crowded overnight. A lot of bus trips are missing, and it helps no one. So that's, they could do that on the bus option. Yes, Matt, you can put it on if you want to. So that's option number one. Now, with the Long Island Railroad, and I want to thank my representative, my Long Island Railroad Regional Vice President, Matt Camper, for compiling this list. So I'm going to read this list to the news media. Those of you who are watching, who are tuning in, y'all can read the list. So the first thing that we're suggesting to the Long Island Railroad is that they make the following adjustments on their trains to accommodate more overnight riders, and that would help people on the overnight. Because we see there's many express trains that they pass through Queens but don't stop at some Queens stations. And by making some local stops on some mainline trains and Babylon trains, you could then accommodate more riders headed into the city. And that could give people an option, especially people who live in Southeast Queens, but also Western Queens as well. So I'm going to read you the weekend list of options that we've come up with. So this would be for Saturday and Sunday overnight between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. And before I read the list, we are also suggesting that the Long Island Railroad start cross-honoring at about 12:30 to 12:45 a.m. It doesn't make sense to start at 1 a.m. because the first train doesn't leave till about 1:42 going to Southeast Queens. So that's why we suggested 12:45, 12:30. So I'm going to read the weekend list. So Passengers United, Matt Camper, our Long Island Railroad Regional Director, is suggesting that the 1:49 a.m. train from Penn Station to Babylon make added stops at Forest Hills and Kew Gardens. The 12:50 a.m. train from Babylon to Penn would make added stops at Kew Gardens, Forest Hills, and Woodside. The 4:05 a.m. train from Penn to Long Beach would make added stops at Locust Manor, Laurelton, and Rosedale. And the 1:24 a.m. train from Penn to Ronkonkoma would make added stops at Hollis and Queens Village. The 3:10 a.m. train from Penn Station to Ronkonkoma would make added stops at Hollis and Queens Village, which is good. The 2:19 a.m. train from Huntington to Penn Station would make added stops at Hollis and Queens Village. The 3:47 a.m. train from Huntington to Penn would make added stops in Hollis and Queens Village. And the 2:01 a.m. train from Ronkonkoma to Penn would make added stops at Kew Gardens, Forest Hills, and Woodside. So this is the weekend list that we just read you. Now the weekday list is very critical because a lot of people travel weekday overnights. So the 1:49 a.m. train from Penn Station to Babylon would make added stops at Forest Hills and Kew Gardens. The 2:59 a.m. train from Penn Station to Long Beach would make added stops at Forest Hills and Kew Gardens. The 1 a.m. train from Babylon to Penn would make added stops at Kew Gardens and Forest Hills. And the 1:36 a.m. train from Babylon to Penn would make added stops at Kew Gardens and Forest Hills. The 3:30 a.m. train from Babylon to Penn would make added stops at Kew Gardens and Forest Hills. And the 12:35 a.m. train from Huntington to Penn would make added stops at Queens Village and Hollis. And the 1:39 a.m. train from Huntington to Penn would make added stops at Queens Village and Hollis. So by having all these trains make intermediate stops, we think it's going to help a lot of people. And especially, like for instance, the train that I mentioned earlier that stops at Laurelton, Locust Manor, Laurelton, and Rosedale. We need more trains stopping along the Rosedale corridor because that's going to help a lot of people overnight. So we would strongly suggest that to the MTA. Sorry guys if I'm looking down. I'm so used to looking down. But that would help a lot of people within the MTA region. So that would be great. Also, one of the things that we're also suggesting is a new overnight bus route from Manhattan to Queens and vice versa. We're going to be releasing that later on my YouTube channel. That will be taped. But everything that we've mentioned to you, I'm going to be mentioning it again on YouTube. We'll do a B-roll for the news media with some of these comments so that they can use the video later in their newscast. And again, at Passengers United, we do not agree with certain other advocacy groups that have suggested keeping the subways open between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. And the reason why is because a lot of transit workers have died. And I'm very, very concerned that, being that the MTA closed the subway because there was a homeless issue in the subways. And the MTA couldn't get the homeless out, so they had to close the subways in order to do the necessary cleaning. So technically, this is a city issue which needs to be handled by the mayor, social services, and the NYPD. And they need to be able to keep the homeless out of the system. But the problem is if you keep the subways open for passengers and passengers get sick, and we don't know, there's supposed to be a second wave of COVID-19 coming. So I don't want to say that it's a good idea to keep the subways open. I'm very skeptical about that, because what if people get sick? What if overnight passengers get sick again? And this time there's a second wave coming, according to the WHO and according to the CDC and according to everyone else. So we don't know what could happen. So we need to be very mindful about that. I know people want the subways open. I do too. But we need to be very mindful and very cautious about how we go about that. I think the overnight service shutdown in many ways is working, but I